The morning of my sister's wedding started with something that shouldn't have existed. Not the ceremony. Not the flowers. Not even the rain that came out of nowhere. The problem was the gift. It was sitting on my kitchen table when I woke up. A small silver box. No return address. No note. Just my name written in my sister's handwriting. Which made absolutely no sense. Because my sister, Emily, had been dead for 3 weeks. Now before you assume this is some kind of sick joke, believe me, I thought the same thing. I stared at the box for a long time, waiting for my phone to buzz. Waiting for someone to laugh and say got you. But nothing happened. So I opened it. Inside was a silver locket. Old. Heavy. The kind of jewelry that feels like it has history or secrets. At first I thought it was just a sentimental gift. Something she meant to give me before everything happened. But when I tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. Until I noticed the tiny hinge on the side. And when I finally pried it open, something fell out onto the table. A key. Not a house key. Not a car key. A rusted skeleton key. The kind you only see in old movies or locked doors that haven't been opened in decades. But that wasn't the strangest part. Because tucked inside the locket, folded into impossibly small squares, was a piece of paper. And when I unfolded it, my stomach dropped. It wasn't a letter. It was a property deed. For a massive estate. An estate that, according to the document, belonged to me. There was just one problem. I had never seen this place in my life. And at the bottom of the deed, right above the signature, was a name I didn't recognize. But Emily did. Because 3 days before she died, she wrote about that exact name in a letter she never meant for me to find. And what she said about it would completely destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. I didn't believe the deed at first. A random estate, suddenly in my name, delivered by a sister who had already been buried? Yeah, it sounded insane. So I did the obvious thing. I looked up the address. The property was listed about 3 hours outside the city, in a rural county I had never even heard of. When the map loaded, all I saw was forest. Endless trees. No photos. No real estate listings. Nothing. Which was strange. Because the deed described a 7,000 square foot estate sitting on nearly 30 acres. A property that size should have a trail online, old listings, photos, something. But the internet showed almost nothing. So I studied the document again. The paper wasn't new. Slightly yellowed edges. Faded ink. At the bottom sat an official county clerk seal, meaning the deed was real. Then I noticed the date. My stomach dropped. The property had been transferred into my name 8 years ago. 8 years. Back then I was broke. 2 jobs. A tiny apartment with a leaking ceiling. There was no estate. No inheritance. At least, none that I knew about. That's when I remembered the box. After Emily died, my parents gave me a cardboard box filled with her notebooks and letters. I hadn't opened it yet. Until that moment. I drove to their house, grabbed the box, and started reading. Halfway through, I found a letter dated 3 days before Emily died. Her handwriting looked rushed. Shaky. The first line made my chest tighten. If you're reading this, it means they didn't stop you from finding the house. But the next line was worse. The house was never ours, and the names we grew up with aren't ours either. And then she wrote a name I had never heard before. A name she said our family had been hiding for decades. And once I saw it, I realized why someone had hidden that key in the first place. The name Emily wrote didn't belong to anyone in my family. Not my parents. Not our grandparents. Not even distant relatives. Yet she had circled it 3 times in the letter like it was the most important thing in the world. Daniel Mercer. Under the name, Emily had written one short sentence. This is the man who really owned the house. I sat there staring at the paper, trying to remember if I'd ever heard that name before. Nothing came to mind. But Emily hadn't stopped there. The next part of the letter looked even more rushed, like she had been writing faster and faster. I started digging after I found the old tax records. The estate isn't abandoned. It never was. Someone has been paying the property taxes every single year. That made my stomach twist. Because if someone was still paying the taxes, that meant someone still cared about the property. And if the deed said I owned it, then why would someone else be maintaining it? Emily explained. The payments aren't coming from you. They're coming from a trust. One that was created the same year the property was transferred into your name. 8 years ago. The same date on the deed. But the part that really bothered me was the last line she wrote on that page. I think Mom and Dad know about this. I actually laughed when I read that. Not because it was funny, but because it sounded impossible. My parents were normal people. Quiet. Predictable. The kind of people who argued about grocery coupons and watched the same TV shows every night. Secret estates? Hidden trusts? Stolen identities? That wasn't our family. At least, that's what I thought. Until I turned the page and saw what Emily had written next. Because according to her, the estate wasn't just a house. It was proof. Proof that the people who raised us might not be who they claimed to be. And buried somewhere inside that property was the reason our real identities had been erased. I didn't sleep that night. Emily's words kept looping in my head. The house was never ours. The names we grew up with aren't ours either. By morning, curiosity had turned into something stronger. I needed to see that house. So I grabbed the skeleton key, the deed, and Emily's letter and started driving. 3 hours later, the city was gone. Highways turned into narrow back roads. Eventually, even the pavement disappeared. Just gravel. And trees. Endless trees. The GPS started cutting out right as the road curved toward a rusted iron gate. The address matched. Exactly. Beyond the gate, a long dirt driveway stretched into the woods. Branches hung low, scraping the roof of my car as I slowly rolled forward. But something felt wrong. The driveway wasn't overgrown. Someone had been clearing it. Recently, the trees finally opened up, and that's when I saw it. The estate. It was huge. 3 stories of dark stone and tall windows sitting alone in a massive clearing. A wraparound porch. Wide steps leading to a heavy oak front door. But it didn't look abandoned. The grass was cut. The walkway was clean. Even the windows looked recently washed. Someone had been maintaining this place. I stepped out of the car, gripping the rusted key. The silence around the house felt almost unnatural. When I reached the front door, my hands were shaking. The skeleton key slid into the lock. For a second, nothing. Then, click. The door opened slowly. And right there on the floor inside was an envelope. Waiting. With my name written across the front. In my father's handwriting. Which was impossible. Because according to Emily's letter, Dad was the one person who was never supposed to know I found the house. I stood in the doorway for a long time, just staring at that envelope. My father's handwriting was unmistakable. Blocky. Careful. The same way he labeled every box in the garage when I was growing up. But that only made it worse. Because according to Emily's letter, Mom and Dad weren't supposed to know anything about the house. Yet here was proof that my father had been here. Recently. The envelope wasn't dusty. It looked almost new. Like it had been placed there waiting for me. Slowly, I stepped inside. The house smelled like old wood and something faintly metallic, like the air had been sealed up for years. My footsteps echoed across a wide marble floor as I bent down and picked up the envelope. My hands were shaking when I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No explanation. Just one sentence written across the center of the page. If you're standing in this house, it means Emily couldn't stop you. My stomach dropped. Couldn't stop me? Emily had been the one leaving clues. The key. The letters. Why would my father think she was trying to stop me? I turned the page over, hoping for more. There was only one thing on the back. A date. And a time. Tonight. 8:30 p.m. Underneath it, my father had written 4 words. We need to talk here. I checked my phone. 8:12 p.m. Which meant one thing. My father knew I would find the house, and he knew exactly when I'd arrive. Then I heard something that made every muscle in my body freeze. A car engine. Somewhere outside on the long gravel driveway. Headlights flashed through the tall front windows. And a familiar voice echoed from the porch. Go ahead, my father called out calmly. Open the rest of the rooms. Then he said something that made the situation even more disturbing. After all, it used to belong to your real family. My heart was pounding as I stood in the entry hall. Outside, gravel cracked under slow footsteps. My father was walking toward the door. For a split second, I almost ran. Got in the car. Disappeared. But Emily's words stopped me. The house is proof. So instead of leaving, I moved deeper inside. The hallway opened into a study lined with shelves of old binders and file boxes. A heavy wooden desk sat in the center. On it, folders. Dozens. Each one labeled with a different name. I opened the first one expecting property papers. Instead, I found a birth certificate. A photo. A driver's license. But the face in the photo didn't match the name on the document. Confused, I opened another folder. Same thing. Different identity. Same pattern. Again and again. None of these identities matched the people listed. Then I saw a folder sitting alone on the corner of the desk. My name on it. Or at least, the name I grew up with. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was my birth certificate. But something was off. The paper looked too new, too clean, and clipped to it was a typed note. Original identity reassigned. Subject relocated successfully. Footsteps behind me. Slow. Controlled. I turned. My father was standing in the doorway, holding another folder. You weren't supposed to see those yet, he said calmly. My mouth went dry. What is this? He stepped inside like he had rehearsed this moment. Then he said something I'll never forget. Those identities weren't stolen. A pause. They were created. He looked around the room like the house itself was listening. Then finally, this house is where we built them. And before I could ask what he meant, he dropped the folder onto the desk. Inside was a list of names, and one of them had already been crossed out. I stared at that crossed out name for a long second, because I recognized it. It was Emily's. My throat went dry. You're telling me she was part of this? My father didn't answer right away. Instead, he closed the study door behind him. The sound echoed through the house like a lock clicking shut on something much bigger than a room. Then he finally spoke. Emily wasn't supposed to get involved, he said. She found records she shouldn't have seen. My mind was spinning. Records of what? He looked at me for a long moment, like he was deciding how much truth I could survive. Then he said it. This estate isn't just a house. It's a registry site. A place where identities were reassigned and documented under protection programs that don't officially exist. I laughed once. Instinctively. That's insane. But he didn't move. Didn't blink. So the laugh died in my throat. He walked over to the desk and tapped the folder in front of me. Your life started here, he said quietly. Not where you think it did. My hands clenched. Then what about my memories? My childhood. That's the point, he replied. They're consistent enough to function. That's all they need to be. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. I could barely breathe. Then my father said the final thing that shattered everything. Emily tried to reverse her file, he said. She wasn't trying to stop you from finding the house. A pause. She was trying to stop you from remembering what happens once you do. My stomach dropped. Because suddenly I realized something terrifying. Emily didn't leave me clues to find the truth. She left them to prepare me for it. And as I looked down at that crossed-out name again, I noticed something new written beneath it in faint ink. A warning. If he opens the final room, he won't be able to go back. And my father was already walking toward the basement door.